Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting of North Carolina Water Resources Commission to order, April 16, 2026, 9 a.m. I'd like to remind everybody to silence their phones, please. This meeting is being streamed live for the public to attend and recorded as a public record. The recording of this meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.gov. I'd like to now call Commissioner Tommy Fonville for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call Commissioner Joe Budd for invocation.
Pray. Lord, we gather today in this great state of North Carolina, grateful for the opportunity to serve its people and its wild places. From the ancient peaks of the Blue Ridge Mountains to the shifting sands of the Outer Banks, we thank you for the breathtaking beauty of the land we call home. We ask for your hand of protection over our wildlife law enforcement officers who patrol our woods and waters. Grant them safety and discernment as they serve our communities with honor. We also pray for rain at the request of our chairman. We also pause to recognize the brave men and women of our military. We are profoundly grateful for the freedoms we enjoy, the freedom to roam these lands, to fish these waters, and to gather here today, all of which are secured by their sacrifice and vigilance. Guide this commission in its deliberations, grant us clear minds and passionate hearts, so that we may honor the wildlife, the habitats, and the citizens of this state and all that we do. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Joe. I'd like to call out Margo Maple for a roll call of the commissioner present.
Good morning. Going to do a roll call for our commissioners present for our April 16, 2026 meeting. Chairman Mark Craig.
Here.
Vice Chairman Landon Zimmer.
Here.
David Hoyle.
Here.
John Coley.
Here.
Wes Segers. Tommy Fonville.
Here.
Tom Berry.
Here.
Brad Standback.
Here.
Jim Ruffin.
Here.
Ray Clifton.
Here.
Steve Wyndham. Monty Crump.
Here.
John Stone. Hayden Rogers. John Alexander.
Here. Tom
Hayslip.
Here.
J.C. Cole. Mike Alford. Joe Budd.
Here.
Reed Smith.
Here.
Justin Boyd. Mr. Chairman, you have.
Thank you, Margo. All right, I'd like to remind everybody of the mandatory ethics inquiry. North Carolina General Statute 138A-15 mandates the commission period to remind all commissioners of their duty to avoid conflicts of interest and appearance of conflict under this chapter. And the chair also inquires as to whether there is any known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before the commission at this time. It is the duty of each commissioner who is aware of such personal conflict of interest or appearance of conflict to notify the chair of the same. Commissioner Zimmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In an abundance of caution and to avoid appearance of conflict, I'd like to recuse myself from all of Exhibit H when we come to vote on that.
Thank you. Have you got that, Margo? Very good. All right, the next order of business. The meetings were distributed for each of y'all in your agenda packages. It were the minutes of February the 9th, 2026, February the 19th, 2026, and March 24th, 2026. I would ask for a motion to accept these minutes for Exhibit A, B, and C.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. The next order of business, I'd like to call on Jason Cottle to present our financial status report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. I'll remind everybody before we begin, the data being presented here is as of February 28th of 2026. Looking at total year-to-date revenues in our general fund category, $109,560,259.70. Our total expenditures year-to-date in the same, $111,964,968.82, leaving us with a fund balance as of February 28th of $18,708,432.89. Looking at our capital improvement category, total revenues as of February 28 were $16,534,166.96. Our total expenditures in the same were $13,960,000 $875,556.47, leaving us with a fund balance of $7,133,343.05. Moving on to our endowment fund, as of February 28th, overall fund balance is now $255,259,599.80. Equity allocation currently is just over 78%, and our short term is just under 22%, falling in line with the benchmark set some time back. Looking at our expendable income, to date, we have $103,636,251.51 of expendable income earned. Just to point out quickly, a question was asked by Commissioner Ruffin, I believe yesterday, about the principal. This $129 million that you see here in principal, as a reminder, is statutorily protected in perpetuity. After we factor out our known obligations for the next 3 years, we've got a remaining expendable income balance of $54,352,875.51. As progress speeds up on some of these projects, you'll see these obligations dwindle. But as I mentioned yesterday, there'll be new obligations added to that list as we go to this next slide. Exhibit E, we've got the amount of expendable income earned on the endowment investments in calendar year 2025, and that total is $30,824,245.24. And this will require a motion and a second of approval.
Absolutely. Ask for a motion on exhibit E.
So moved.
Second.
Alexander. Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you very much. That concludes my presentation.
Chairman, I'd like to make a note here outside of the board. How fortunate we are to have this endowment fund. The Land and Property Matters is, do not nearly do what we do without the endowment. So we would just make note how fortunate we are to have that. A lot of those.
The former chairman was very wise to set it up there.
It was a big deal. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up is the committee reports. We'll start with the Wild Turkey Committee. Commissioner Bud.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. The Wild Turkey Committee held a very exciting and engaging virtual meeting on Tuesday, March 17th at 9 a.m. The committee received an update on the numerous collaborative meetings the staff attended throughout the year. Updates were shared on the recent 13th National Wild Turkey Symposium, where 17% of the research findings presented were directly tied to North Carolina and research funded by the commission. It was also noted that the commission currently has projects underway or are collaborating on projects that address 3 current emerging issues in turkey management. Those are genetics, disease, and predation management. Finally, staff discussed the National Wild Turkey Technical Committee and its role in turkey management, including working with all states to evaluate and improve various management and survey techniques. Having no further business, the committee was adjourned.
Thank you, Commissioner Bud. Next up is the Habitat and Non-Game and Endangered Species Committee report. Commissioner Stanback.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Habitat and Non-Game Endangered Species Committee met on April 15th, 2026 at 9:30 a.m. Staff presented the Yellow Lamp Mussel Conservation Plan. No comments were received during the 30-day public comment period. The committee endorsed the plan, which will be presented for consideration in Exhibit P later this morning in this meeting. Staff then provided summaries reports for the freshwater fish, freshwater mollusk, freshwater crustacean subcommittees of the Scientific Council, including results from status assessment tool evaluations. Status changes were proposed for 6 aquatic species. The committee members approved staff's proposed changes and recommended staff prepare rule text for the commission's consideration in June 2026. Last, staff presented the 2026 nominations for the Non-Game and Wildlife Advisory Committee membership detailed in the code. Committee endorsed the staff recommendation, which we presented later during this meeting. Having no further business, the meeting was adjourned.
Thank you, Commissioner Stanback. Next up is the Finance Audit and Compliance Committee. Commissioner Crump.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Finance Audit and Compliance Committee met yesterday morning during committee day. Internal Audit Director Elizabeth Davis requested approval for revisions to the fiscal year 26 internal audit plan. The committee voted to approve the revisions to the plan. An update was then provided on engagements, observations, as well as on administrative operations. Internal audit disclosed the audit function will abstain from auditing the internal mileage rate due to involvement in the current rate calculation. Internal audit will reassess the independence and objectivity annually or until the rate is recalculated by finance office. CFO Jason Cottle presented a comparison between the current and prior fiscal years, highlighting the revenue and expenditure activity in both the general fund and capital improvement funds, offering commentary of variances greater than $1 million over the prior year. An update was presented as to the current fund balance and asset allocation of the agency's endowment. Examples were provided of current year uses of expendable investment income, highlighting the impact of work done by the agency that may not have otherwise been possible without these dedicated funds. Lastly, the amount of expendable investment income earned in calendar year was presented and has already been voted on during the business meeting for approval. Commission Chairman Craig requested that an ongoing progress update on the Setzer Hatcher renovation project be revisited at all future audit and compliance committee meetings. There being no further business, the meeting was adjourned.
Thank you, Commissioner Trump. Next up is the Migratory Birds and Waterfowl Committee, Commissioner Coley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday, the Migratory Birds and Waterfowl Committee met, and we went on to review the 2026-27 federal migratory game bird frameworks and staff recommendations for this year's hunting seasons. Also, staff presented the recommendation for peregrine falcon take for falconry. Staff shared updates on the mid-winter tundra swan surveys and the eastern mallard study we are participating in with the other Atlantic flyway states. Finally, staff shared some early findings from the duck hunter survey that was just finished, including the fact that duck hunting in North Carolina generates an almost $150 million in economic impact to our state. Having no further business, the meeting was adjourned.
Thank you, Commissioner Coley. Next up is the Education and Communication Committee, Commissioner Hazel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Education and Communication Committee, met on Wednesday, April 16th, 2026 at 1:30. Staff presented an update on the WRC managed shooting range rule. The rule is currently in the gangland section of the administrative code. Staff has been working to update the rule to align with current operational procedures. The rule will be moved to its own section in the NCAC. It will be introduced during the virtual Rules Committee meeting on Thursday, April 23rd. The committee also received an update on the Commission's youth shooting sports program. 9 district youth hunter education skill tournaments were held in March. The program saw an increase of 23 teams, with the largest growth in District 4, where 8 new teams were added. The North Carolina National Archery and the School State Bullseye Tournament was held in February with 50 schools and over 1,037 archers. The State 3D Archery Tournament was hosted in Caldwell County in March with 26 schools and 441 archers participating. The meeting continued with the presentation of the agency's conservation engagement partnerships. These partnerships included Eco Explorer with NC Arboretum. The Commission's Wildlife Education and Land Water Access Division worked together to identify kiosks at various agency sites, and staff posted signs that engage families in wildlife and conservation learning while they collect digital badges. The meeting ended with a brief update on the Barn Owl Camera Project, which has engaged people online through a nesting pair. 2 owlets have recently hatched, generated expanded interest from NC schools, and sparking more conservations on the agency's social media. After the presentations, the committee meeting was adjourned at approximately 2 o'clock. This concludes my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Hazel. Next up is the Land Acquisition and Property Committee, Commissioner Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our land acquisition property committee met at 2:15 p.m. on April 15th. The committee reviewed and approved one phase one land acquisition proposal, non-phase two land acquisition for the Jackson tract, Lane County staff. Now, this is interesting, as it's noted by our chairman that there might be an issue with an in holding. So all this is contingent upon the staff confirm there are no issues with the apparent in holding. Regarding Bernese County game land easement request, the committee reviewed that WRC staff work with the state property owners to extend a letter of intent to TED Renewables for the utilities request. Staff will also work with state property office to investigate terms, conditions, and values for a lease, perpetual easement, as well as a term limited easement. Staff will present their findings at a later meeting. Following the conclusion of regular business, one additional topic was considered. The committee considered two counteroffer options for the Buffalo Creek Headwaters project in Ogden, Caldwell counties. After an extensive discussion, the committee made a recommendation for the staff to contact Forest Legacy Program and determine if the original Kirkland appraisal can be used and that the property acquired with no cost to the state. If the Kirkland appraisal cannot be used, the committee recommendation to proceed with the acquisition of the property utilizing $12,589,000 from the Forest Legacy Program, $910 from the Commission Endowment Fund, for a total purchase price of $13,500,000. The acquisition price is supported by a recent Yellow Book appraisal, the supporting Yellow Book appraisal review that sets the property value at $16,786,000. However, staff will contact Forest Legacy Program to determine the committee also. Forest Legacy Program to determine the committee also moved to deny the landowner request to retain a timber deed on the property. And I'll conclude to say if this comes together as proposed, if we could use that first easement, that first appraisal and get this land basically for free, it'd be a real star for the commission in the state of North Carolina. Jeff Fisher has done a really special job. He worked and applied for Forest Legacy grant. We didn't have to do that. There's several other things he did, and it's all in trying to help us get this property. So thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes our visit.
Thank you, Commissioner Berry, and thank the Land Acquisition and Property Committee for the continued good work. It would be remiss of me not to thank the DOT for the gift of almost 600 acres of bog habitat in the mountain for bog turtles and many other endangered species. So thank y'all for coordinating that as well. Next up is the Executive Committee. The Executive Committee met yesterday and held a robust discussion on ideas to reduce angler confusion caused by the North Carolina Division Marine Fisheries proclamations for certain species. The committee agreed to explore the option of obtaining limited proclamation authority through the state legislature and to continue discussions regarding rulemaking that would allow for the temporary applicability of a DMF proclamation while temporary rulemaking is considered. There being no further business, this committee adjourned. Next up was the Committee of the Whole. The Committee of the Whole met yesterday afternoon and began with a review of proposed water safety rulemaking for Brunswick County. An update on the Setzer fish hatchery and spring trout stocking was presented. The committee then reviewed temporary rulemaking for inland fisheries related to sheepshead. Permanent rulemaking proposals concerning license fees were also presented. The committee also reviewed a petition plan rulemaking regarding the Butler Falls and Noose Game Land. An update was provided on chronic waste and disease management, followed by the introduction of temporary rulemaking notices of text for CWD management areas. There being no further business, the committee was adjourned. The next order of business, I'd like to call on Christian Waters to introduce our speaker, the agency spotlight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Commissioners. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce our spotlight presenter. Most of you know Dr. Heather Evans. She's our conservation geneticist. She has served in that position since 2020. And prior to that, She conducted multiple projects for the agency via contract through the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. And her lab today continues to be located there at the museum. She received her degree, her bachelor's degree from the University of Georgia and her doctorate degree from Duke University. She also chairs our internal research committee and is a liaison with North Carolina State University, where she holds an adjunct faculty position, and with the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, where she is an adjunct researcher. Heather?
Thank you, Christian, and thank you, commissioners. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about our genetics program. As Christian mentioned, it's been about 5 years now since I was hired and we started this program. And so today I wanted to highlight some of the applications that we have developed both in-house and with our partners externally to move the mission of the agency forward. As Christian mentioned, our lab is located at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. This is a multi-user lab, so any of the curators that are there at the museum also have bench space there. We take up this side here is our allocated lab bench space. And because all the curators, you can see this is a very busy lab, are there often working on their own genetics projects, which we are often collaborating on. This sets up a really nice space to work with partners. What do we do in that lab? The basic idea is to use genetics to answer ecological questions and provide data to our biologists that can be used for management and conservation decisions. And that can range from anything from looking at hybridization of species, species identification, population estimates, using eDNA to do presence-absence surveys. And we do these on a wide range of species. This graphic shows some of the species that we have worked with in the last 5 years. And so today I'm not going to talk about every project that we've done or every species we've worked on, because you all did not sign up for a full day symposium, though I'm happy to give one if you ever want to do that. So I'm going to highlight a few of those things that we do. And I wanted us to start with talking about parentage analysis and our stockings. As you all know, we spend a lot of resources, both in time and money, to propagate animals and stock them out onto the landscape. And we need a way to track those stockings to measure the success of those investments. One of the ways that we can do that is through genetics. And the way that this works is that we develop marker panels that are species specific for whatever species of interest we are looking at. In this case, we're looking at a marker panel we developed for American shad. This is 12 genetic markers, and this is called our genetic fingerprint. So we're able to uniquely identify each individual fish. And the probability of identity is 1 × 10⁻⁹. What that means is that the probability of us picking 2 fish up out of a river and them having the same identical genotype by chance is 1 in 10 quintillion. So when we say that we can identify an individual fish, we have a very high confidence in our ability to do that. And because we can identify each individual fish, we can also identify progeny of those fish. So when those broodfish are brought into the hatchery, we genotype all of them. They go into our broodfish database. And then at some point later in time, we can go back into the river, collect fish of interest, and we want to know, did they come from the hatchery or not? We then do the same kind of genotyping analysis with those fish collected from the river and compare their genotypes back to our brood genotypes. And if they match, we know that they were bred at the hatchery. And if they don't match, then de facto, they were bred in the wild and represent natural recruitment. So this kind of analysis that we call parentage-based tagging, or PBT, allows us to answer this kind of gold standard question, what is our % hatchery contribution? So this is a graph of % hatchery contribution of American shad in the Roanoke River from 2012 through 2024. One of the things that I want to point out is that not only can we get % hatchery contribution, but because we know exactly who the parents were and when they respond, we can also get a few other pieces of information. In this graph, you're seeing the total % hatchery contribution, but you're also seeing an age class structure. So with each of those colors representing the year that fish respond. We can also do some stocking evaluations if we set up the tanks correctly. So if we have a tank of parents or brood that are saved and stocked into the Neuse River, and then a second tank that is stocked into the Tar River, we can now do some comparisons between those two stocking events. So if we look at our striped bass from 2024 that we collected from the noose, we saw that it was 85% hatchery contribution. Again, we were able to tell exactly when those fish were spawned. So we know that the age classes were ranged from 2016 to 2020. We know exactly which hatchery they came from. And interestingly, we also saw that 2 fish that we collected in the noose were actually stocked into the tar, because again, we know exactly which tank they came from. And similarly, we found 3 fish in the noose, in the tar, that were stocked into the noose. So this tells us that we have some low-level migration occurring between these 2 river systems in our striped bass. We can also do some evaluation of age or size classes at stocking. So again, if you have 1 tank and you stock them as phase 1 fish, another tank that is stocked as phase 2 fish, then you go back out and collect them, you can get some information about survivability depending on what size you stock those fish at. So in Cape Fear in 2024, our striped bass, we had 92% hatchery contribution. 17 of the fish that we found were stocked as phase 1, and 74 of the phase 2 fish were stocked as phase 2 fish. You can then compare those to total numbers of fish stocked and get some idea of survivability based on, again, the size of stocking.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Do y'all stock, or do we stock above some of the dams? I'm just saying the Tar River, above like the Rocky Mount Reservoir dams.
I am not familiar with exact locations for the tar. I know that for American shad, great.
It's all kind of in that coastal plain where the salt water and the fresh water meet is generally where we stock our phase 2 fish on all our rivers. Sorry.
Yep, great, because I didn't have the answer, so thank you. Okay, so for genetic parentage-based tagging, we're able to answer that kind of gold star question, what is our % hatchery contribution? But because of the data set that we have collected, and depending on how our hatchery managers set up their tanks, we can also collect additional informations. The other nice thing about these kinds of genetic analyses is that once you have the data set, you can run additional analyses that aren't necessarily related to the parentage. We call these our population genetics. So population genetics are a suite of metrics that inform our managers about the health of our population, the genetic health of our population. These can range anything from looking at how many populations do we have and what are their boundaries. What is the genetic diversity, both within and between populations? Do we have inbreeding going on? What is our effective number of estimated breeders? Is there connectivity between these populations? And we do these kinds of analysis for both game and non-game. For non-game species, these population genetic studies are especially important because they go into species status assessment reports. These species status assessment reports are the backbone for any ESA decisions, and they go into things like state and federal conservation plans, listing decisions, and recovery plans. Those species status assessments are based on 3 principles which are referred to as the 3 Rs. The first of those principles is resiliency, or the ability of a species to bounce back from disturbance. And that is captured in our genetic analyses by looking at metrics such as how many effective breeders do we have on the landscape. Another principle is redundancy, which looks at the number and distribution of populations, and that is done through a population structure analysis. And then finally, representation, which is the ability to adapt to a changing environment. And so the higher the genetic diversity within a population, the higher their adaptive capability. All of those metrics then, as I said, go into these species status assessment reports. So this is an example of a population genetics analysis that we did for orange fin mad tom. This is a small catfish, about 4 to 6 inches, lives in North Carolina and Virginia. We went and collected orange fin mad tom from 6 distinct locations in North Carolina. And the population genetics analysis told us that there's 4 populations genetically. You can see here, there is a population in the upper and lower dam that is contiguous despite the presence of a dam. There was also one population in the Roanoke and its tributary, the Pig. And then the Smith River forms a separate population and the Mayo River forms a separate population. And what this graph tells us, because these are so tightly clustered and distinct from one another, we know that these populations are fragmented and they do not have any connectivity between them. The other metrics that we found were that there's low genetic diversity in all of these populations, but especially in the Smith, Mayo, and Dan. We didn't see evidence of inbreeding, but we did see low effective estimated breeders. And so all of this population was shared internally, but also externally with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, where orange fin mad tom is currently under review for listing status. And those metrics will be considered as part of that analysis. But sometimes, yes.
So is that because, I mean, were those, I guess, diverse mad toms, were they all at one time together and then over time they've been separated?
Yes, due to fragmentation from dams, other anthropogenic activities, also low water quality is probably impacting those populations. Yep. So sometimes we want to know how many animals do we have in a population? And we can also use genetics to answer that question. So at the heart of this analysis is a simple equation. So when we do these kinds of analysis, this is called a capture, mark, recapture. The basic premise is that you would go out into the field, you would do a sampling event, and you would somehow mark all of the animals that you captured. So in this analysis, you go on day one, you maybe paint a turtle shell. You then leave, let those animals redistribute in the environment, come back at a second time, do another sampling event, and count how many of those animals captured on the second day are recaptures based on that marking. So this equation then is the number of animals marked in the first day over the total population, which is what we're solving for, is proportional to the number of animals recaptured over the total number of animals captured in that second sampling event. And then you can just solve for N. Now, this is a very simplified version of this capture, mark, recapture analysis, and current models take into account things like environmental covariates and sampling techniques and how those might affect detection probability. But this is kind of the underlying basis for those analyses. We have done this analysis on multiple species. I wanted to talk a little bit about other ways that we might do this. So people sometimes use camera traps. The problem with camera traps is that it can be difficult to identify individual animals when you're just looking at a picture. You're not 100% sure whether that's a different animal or the same animal. The other thing that you can do is physically mark it, like in that example with the turtles. So that could be putting a tag on a deer or somehow painting or otherwise marking the animal. The issue with those techniques is that it might change the behavior of the animal. And so you might skew your results based on, they might not move as far as they would have otherwise. So when you come back and recapture, you're actually overestimating your recaptures. Or they might lose the tag. The great thing about genetics is that they can't lose the tag because it's literally they're in their DNA. So they carry that with them all the time. It won't change their behavior because they're used to carrying around their own DNA. And what you can do is collect poop or hair, and we can use those samples to create that distinct genetic fingerprint, again, using a species-specific panel, and then look at how many times do we see that distinct fingerprint showing up in our data set. Each time we see it is an instance of a recapture, which then gets plugged into those models. So we have done this internally and externally with collaborators, depending on the species, for both bear, elk, and deer. We do the genotyping and then hand it to collaborators who run those advanced models for us. And then they give us information on abundance, density, and we can use that data to inform our management decisions. One thing that we talk about quite a bit is environmental DNA. I have talked to you all about eDNA before. Usually when we talk about this method, we're talking about a single species assay. So in a given water sample, you're going to have DNA shed from all of the living organisms in that system. We're often only interested in finding one of those particular organisms. And so what we do is design a probe that is homologous, that matches the DNA of that specific species. And if it is in the water sample that we collected, it will bind to that DNA and fluoresce in that nice qPCR machine that Jason mentioned yesterday. And that lets us know that the species that we're interested in is present within that sample. So this is a really good method for things like looking at detection of rare species like Roanoke log perch, which we've talked about before. It's also good for pathogen detection. So we're actually collaborating with Auburn right now. They're taking water samples from our hatchery and looking for specific pathogens to see if they can do early detection and prevent widespread disease outbreaks in our fish at the hatchery. It can be also used to look at things like fish passage. So we're currently conducting an analysis with SARP, where we're collecting water samples, both downstream and upstream of a culvert. We are then using a eDNA analysis for river herring to see if those fish are able to pass through that culvert. So if we find that herring are downstream, and upstream, great, that's passable. If we only see detection of herring downstream but never upstream, we know that there seems to be some kind of blockage issue with that culvert. And those data will be used to evaluate culvert restorations. There is another kind of eDNA analysis that's called metabarcoding. And this term metabarcoding is derivative of the word barcoding. So if you go to a store and you scan the barcode on that item that you're purchasing, it will come up in the system and tell you exactly what it is that you're buying. We use this term in genetics because there are certain genes within the genome that we can sequence, and it will tell us exactly what species we're looking at. And so if you're doing that on an individual animal, we call that a barcoding. If you're doing it on multiple animals at the same time or multiple individuals at the same time, that's called a metabarcoding analysis. So these metabarcoding analyses are super helpful when you're looking at, for example, diet studies. So here's an example of something pulled out of a fish gut. We can't get a morphological ID on that. You could do a barcoding assay on it by just cutting a piece of that tissue off and running that sequence analysis. Or you could take everything in the intestinal tract, homogenize it, and then do the metabarcoding and get a picture of everything that that animal ate. These are also useful in looking at community assemblages. And we're actually going to be doing quite a bit of this kind of study in the work for the U.S. Forest Service as we continue to analyze the impacts of Hurricane Helene on our species. We're going to be taking water samples from across the range and looking at our community assemblages there. And then that data will be used to inform our species recovery efforts moving forward. And so the last thing I'm going to talk about today is our genetic capabilities for enforcement. So when I first started within the first year, we received a case where an enforcement officer, for whatever reason, had a suspicion that meat in a hunter's possession came from an elk and not from a deer. So he was able to send me a piece of meat from that hunter. I was able to do that barcoding analysis and confirm that it was in fact elk and not deer. And that data was then able to be used to build a case against that hunter. We can also do identity matching. So let's say you have a kill site. Maybe this is on private land where no one was granted permission to hunt, or maybe it's off season. We can take blood or whatever material is left over from that kill site, run it through our deer specific genetic fingerprint panel. And then if you have a deer that you suspect came from that kill site, we can then test that deer and see if they match. For the deer panel that we have, our probability of identity is 1 in 588 million. And while we certainly have a lot of deer in North Carolina, we don't have 588 million of them. And so again, our confidence when we say that these two deer are the same, or these two genotypes are from the same deer, is very high. This kind of analysis also gets brought in for CWD verification. So whenever we have a new CWD positive in a new county, we always do a test where the lab in Wisconsin sends us back that sample that they said was CWD positive. Then we inform the hunter, you have a positive sample for CWD, and we request a sample from the hunter. Most times they have meat in the freezer or it's been mounted, and we can take, we can use a very small drill bit and drill in the back of the antlers. You never see the hole that we've drilled, but we collect the bone powder and we can genotype it that way. So this was the sample from Edgecombe County. You can see here is the genotyping for the lab sample, and here is the genotyping for the hunter sample. Everything in green means it's a match, and you see 100% concordance between these two. And so we were able to verify that, yes, this CWD positive came from this deer that was harvested in Edgecombe County. It's not always so easy. This was another case that we had this year. We had a CWD positive verification from an animal that was harvested in our records from Burke County. When we went to the hunter to tell him that that deer was CWD positive and request the sample, turns out he was like, oh, I didn't actually shoot that deer. I just registered it for my buddy. So then we had to go find the buddy who was the actual hunter, ask him for a sample. He originally said he harvested that deer in Davie County. The next day, he decided it was Mecklenburg County. The whole story was just very squirrely. The two deers that he actually had registered were from Columbus County, and we were just not sure where this deer actually came from, but we know that it's CWD positive, so we'd like to be able to make that determination. So and you can see the samples did not match. What he gave us from Mecklenburg did not match. There's very little green here. So we're now trying to figure out where this positive sample came from. So what we did was run a population structure analysis. to try and get a geographic assignment. And this is the most genetic-y looking slide that you have to look at, and I saved it for the end. So we collected reference samples from kind of all the counties that had been brought into play over the course of the investigation. So we got reference samples from Burke, from Columbus, from Davie, from Mecklenburg. And we also collected, I included some from Surrey and Yadkin just because he lives in Davie and he borders Surrey and Yadkin. We know it's CWD positive there, so I threw those in as well. So these are all the reference samples down here. This last bar is the sample that we're trying to place. And you can see what you get is this kind of unique genetic signature based on the county. So Columbus County has this red signature, Burke has this kind of pink signature. And so the sample in question does not have either that red or that pink showing up in the same manner. So we can eliminate Columbus and Burke. However, we also see that like between Davie and Yadkin County, these all look very similar to each other. And if you run that analysis multiple times, which we always do, the proportion of blue kind of shifts between which county. So sometimes Surrey looked like it had the most blue, but sometimes Mecklenburg looked like it had the most blue. And we just can't confidently place where this sample came from within those four. You can see this is like a latitudinal zone here that seems to be very similar as far as the deer genetics go. So what we're doing here is we're actually collaborating with a researcher up at University of Wisconsin-Madison. The current deer panel that we use has 10 markers. And while we have a very high probability of identity with that particular panel, the population frequencies look very similar to each other. So our marker panel has 10. She has developed a marker panel that has 600 markers and actually a second one that has 60,000 markers. And so we've sent her a subset of samples to genotype, and then she's going to send that data back to me, and I'll run the similar structure analysis and see if we can get any additional fine scale structuring that would allow us to pinpoint where a deer come from at a finer scale. So with that, I just want to introduce the other members of our lab, without whom none of this would happen because they keep everything processing and churning out. Dr. Kara Carlson is our other full-time conservation geneticist. And then Dorian Hayes and Andy Barker are our conservation technicians. And I like to say we're a small but mighty crew. And with that, I'll leave this slide up here. This has my contact information. If any of you ever have any questions about genetics or want to discuss anything, please feel free to give me a call or send me an email, and I can take any questions.
Any questions? Thank you for a informative and fascinating presentation.
Yeah, I
Dr.
guess,
Zimmer?
thank you. I guess that's really impressive and love seeing the data. I mean, you showed just how many real life or scientific applications that has for the commission, and really impressive, really impressed.
Thank you.
Absolutely blowing mind boggling. Go home and tell some of my deer hunting buddies, I think the folks that we can figure out with
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
a whole new concept. Have a law for it. Look at the smile on the law court's all face. I do too, right?
All right.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, I'd like to call on Brad Howard for a
Believe in the question.
update on the migratory birds.
Yeah, if you want to spend a fascinating afternoon, just have Heather come into your office and sit down and say, now, if I gave you this, could you tell me that? And she, oh yeah, we can do that. That's no problem. So genetics, the genetic stuff is fascinating. All right. The arrows aren't working. Okay. Keyboard won't work. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I'm going to present two exhibits today. First, call your attentions to exhibits F1, 2, 3, and 4. F1 is the exhibit containing the federal frameworks for our migratory bird hunting seasons. F2 are the public comments that we received on our proposed seasons within those frameworks. F3 and F4 are both voting exhibits. F3, and I'll get there. There's a lot of stuff here. Oops, I think, did I go too far? No. F3 are the staff recommendations for the migratory bird hunting seasons for fiscal for 26 and 27. There it is. Exhibit F3, and I'm assuming, Mr. Chairman, you would take these both for one vote. Exhibit F3 are the hunting season frameworks, and Exhibit F4 are the frameworks for the extended falconry season for migratory birds. Staff recommends adoption of both exhibits F3 and F4.
All right, we have F3 and F4 before us. Do I have a motion? Second. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Me again.
Yes, sir.
Me again, one more time. We will get the proclamation to Director Briggs to sign to establish the waterfowl seasons for this year and report to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on those. Exhibit G is the proposal, staff recommendations for the allowance of take of migratory peregrine falcons for use in falconry for 2026. Staff recommends adoption of this exhibit as presented.
Have exhibit G before us. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next up, we'll call on Ben Solomon for some land acquisition presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And good morning. We have the Land Acquisition and Property Committee reviewed 10 Phase 2 proposals yesterday, as well as one other property matter. We'll start off with our Phase 2s. We'll start off with Exhibit H1, which is the Little Snowbird Tract. Staff and Land Acquisition and Property Committee proposed to purchase it for $11,850,000. Important to note, $570,000 will be our internal contribution from the endowment fund. Going through a couple of the DOT reallocations, we have first the Franklin Bog in Henderson County, which will be a 9-acre reallocation from DOT. The Sparta Bog property in Allegheny County, which is a 310-acre bog property, another reallocation from DOT. And lastly, the Tallulah Bog property, which is a 228-acre property in Graham County that will be a reallocation from DOT. Exhibit H5, shifting over to a few more acquisitions. We have the Jackson Tract in Bladen County, 370-acre property we proposed to purchase for $520,000. I know we had a note on the in-holding. We have researched the in-holding since the committee meeting yesterday. I'd like to share a few updates on that. The appraisal report that we have determined that there were no easements, encroachments, or restrictions that negatively impact the property. The in-holding is owned by an individual last name Sherman, so not associated with the Jackson tract that we're purchasing. And a couple other notes that I had that I just wanted to share. It's more of probably a housekeeping thing that we don't often get to talk about, but any easements, encroachments, or property restrictions are captured in our due diligence process. We have a couple different steps in our process that would catch any issues like an encroachment or an easement issue. First step is our appraisal. When we obtain an appraisal, we have an appraisal review. We order title work, and we also have review of title by the AG's, the Attorney General's office. So in past situations, if we've had issues with easements or encroachments, it's typically flagged in one of those 4 different steps in our process, but just wanted to note some of the due diligence that we do behind the scenes on matters like that. Continuing forward, we have Exhibit H6, which is the Catherine Creek Tract in Gates County. This is a 125-acre property we proposed to purchase for $226,000. Still in Chowan County, we have the Welch Tract, 125 acres. We proposed to purchase for $109,000. We have the Egypt Road Tract, 115-acre property in Brunswick County, proposed to purchase for $400,000. And one more reallocation that we have mixed in the agenda, Exhibit H9, which is the Odom Shooting Range and Boating Access Area reallocation from the Department of Public Safety. And our last Phase 2 exhibit for today, Exhibit H10, which is the Buffalo Creek Headwaters Tract. And just a quick note on that, the committee recommended yesterday that staff consult with Forest Legacy Program for guidance on that original Rich Kirkland appraisal that sets the property value at $18 million. If a viable appraisal package is approved by the Forest Legacy Program, staff will proceed with executing the project as previously approved in July of 2025. If we do not obtain a viable and approved package by the Forest Legacy Program using that Kirkland appraisal, staff will proceed with executing Exhibit H10 as presented here. And I'll go through that now. Exhibit H10 sets the property value at $16,786,000 through a Tim Talent appraisal. And we would purchase with a Forest Legacy grant contribution of $12,589,500, matched with an endowment fund contribution of $910,500 for a total purchase price of $13,500,000. Staff and the Land Acquisition and Property Committee would like to recommend approval of exhibits H1 through H10.
Mr. Chairman, before you ask for a motion, yes, sir, we need a clarification that the offer of a timber lease is not set under either option. I didn't think of that mentioned.
Correct.
It's part of the motion.
Correct.
So I will make the motion to accept that addition with the amendment to add the non-encumbrance for timber.
So noted. Monty Crook has made the motion for exhibit H1 through H10 with the addition on H10 of no timber encumbrance. Do I have a second? Second by Brad Standback. Discussion. Landon, I believe you recuse yourself from these. Please note. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One final exhibit. We had the one other property matter from yesterday, Exhibit I. And Exhibit I is the TED Renewables easement request, Bertie County Game Land. The LAP committee recommended issuing a letter of intent to TED Renewables for the utility request, and staff will continue to work with the state property office to investigate terms, conditions, and values of 3 different instruments to include a perpetual easement, a term limited easement, as well as a lease. And staff will report back with those findings at a later meeting. And staff and the Land Acquisition Property Committee would like to recommend approval of Exhibit I.
Motion from Commissioner Perry, second. Second, Commissioner Standback. Discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to again commend staff for really being outside the box, listening to the commission in the past. We had issues with easements, as stewards of this property, protecting the resource for, hundreds of years in the future, potentially. Really great job at looking at other instruments other than easements here, and really impressed with you, the way you guys handled that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Zimmer has pointed out easements are forever, leases are time limited. Thank you for that comment. All right, we have a motion and a second on exhibit I. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Next up, we'd like to call on Will Casola, present permanent rulemaking adoption.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. As discussed yesterday in the Committee of the Whole, amendments to 15A NCAC 10F 0305 Brunswick County create a no-wake zone in the Intercoastal Waterway 50 yards east and 50 yards west of the GV Barbie Bridge at Oak Island. Staff recommend adoption of the amended rule text as presented in Exhibit J2.
Okay, we have exhibit J2 before us. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Asa. Thank you. Sorry. Do I have a second?
Alexander.
Second by Alexander. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Next up, we'd like to call on Corey Oakley to present temporary rulemaking adoption.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. As presented yesterday in the Committee of the Whole, this is a temporary rule for Sheep's Head. Comments are in K1, the rules in K2, and staff recommend adoption of K2.
We have exhibit K2 before us. Do I have a motion? Move.
Second.
Commissioner Hoyle moves. Second, Commissioner Coley. Discussion. All the question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion. Next up, we'll call back to the podium. Will Casola to present permanent rulemaking adoption.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As discussed yesterday, the amendments to 15A NCAC 10A 1601 license fees and 10H 1801 general requirements and fees would increase fees by the total increase in the consumer price index rounded up to the nearest whole dollar, since the fee was either established or last increased. Additionally, the amendments update reporting and application requirements for commercial activity permitting. Staff recommend adoption of the amended rule text as presented in Exhibit L2.
We have Exhibit L2 before us. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Commissioner Crump.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Hoyle. Any discussion? All question, all in favor? Opposed? Carried.
The last item I have is a petition for rulemaking. As discussed yesterday, the petition requests two amendments to 15A NCAC 10D 0211, Butner Falls and Noose Game Land. The first amendment would prohibit the use of dogs on a portion of the game land, and a second amendment would designate that same geographic area as archery only. As outlined in rule, the commission shall either deny the petition or initiate rulemaking proceedings by approving and noticing the amended rule text and fiscal note presented in exhibits M1 and M2.
We have M1 and M2 before us. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Commissioner Alexander, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Zimmer. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you, Will. Next up, we'll call on Brad Howard for some more temporary rulemaking notice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Exhibit N. This is a proposal to notice for comment, temporary rule for CWD management area rules. As reviewed in the CAL yesterday, this rule will amend the CWD management area rule to add Sampson County as a CWD management county for this fall. We recommend, staff recommends approval of this exhibit.
Very good. We've got Exhibit N before us. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second, Commissioner Bud, second by Commissioner Hall. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Call on Executive Director Kyle Ditch. Ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Exhibit O is the Non-Game Wildlife Advisory Committee nominations as discussed in the Habitat Non-Game and Endangered Species Committee yesterday. We have 5 seats up. There are 4 reappointments requested from active members that are recommended: David Cooper, Todd Ewing, Sarah McCray, and Judy Ratcliffe. And we have 1 open seat. And staff recommends John Ann Shearer, who now works for the Wildlife Federation, who also spent 36 years with the Fish and Wildlife Service, primarily as the North Carolina coordinator for Partners for Fish and Wildlife. And that is staff's recommendation for appointments.
Good. We've got Exhibit O before us. Do I have a motion? Commissioner Standback, second. Commissioner Ruffin. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next up, Rachel Hope. Species Conservation Plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last exhibit for your consideration. So this is Exhibit P. Oh, this is Exhibit O. This is Exhibit P, the Yellow Lamp Mussel Conservation Plan. This was recommended from the Habitat Non-Game and Endangered Species Committee yesterday, and staff recommend adoption of this plan.
Good. We have Exhibit O, Exhibit P before us. Do I have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Bud, who was second. Second by Commissioner Foley. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? All right, comments by the chair. I'd like to thank everybody for their hard work. Obviously, the Thursday meetings move very quickly. All the work happens at the committee behind the scenes. So I'd like to thank all the committee chairs, the committee members, and most importantly, the staff behind those who make everything happen. I remind the commissioners that your statement of economic interests are due, as are your ethics training. So make sure you get those behind you. And finally, it's turkey season. Take a youth hunting.
Every day's a youth day.
Every day's a youth day.
There you go.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall.
You order, have y'all got the bump stickers over for you every, for you next month? Good deal.
The next call on Executive Director Kyle Brett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get into, thank yous, I do want to remind everybody of the next 2 weeks are fairly busy. On April 22nd at 11 o'clock, we're having an unveiling ceremony at the Kelly and Davis voting access area in Swan Quarter, so folks can attend. April 23rd at 10 o'clock, we'll have the virtual rules committee meeting to go through for the 2027 annual rule cycle. On April 25th, the State Youth Hunter Education Skills Tournaments at the John Lentz Center in Shooting Range in Bellevue. And then on Saturday, May 2nd, the commission will be presented with the Governor's Conservation Award and Natural Resource Agency of the Year. The award will be presented at the Embassy Suites in Cary. And with that, I'd like to thank all the commissioners for all of their time.
What day was that?
May 2nd. And if you're interested in attending, please let me know when we discuss. And then thank all the commissioners for everything, all the hard work and being here and all the phone calls and support. And of course, thank staff. This is the busy time of year, everybody's gearing up field work. Voting season's really kicking off, so unfortunately it's gonna be on the water a lot, so hopefully everybody can remain safe and have a good season.
Very good. Any other business? If not, meeting adjourned.